This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, episode 75. Today we will be discussing the episodes Orison and the Amazing Maleeni. I'm your host, Clara Cook, and with me is Darren Mooney. Hello, Darren.
Hi, Clara. How are things? It's been a bit of a while.
It's been a while, yeah. I think the last time we spoke was when we discussed The End and Folie à Deux.
The end of the 5th season. So we missed the 6th season entirely, or at least, as a reviewing duo. So we're back talking about the 7th season, and what a season it is.
It is. It's an interesting season. Some fans love it, other fans don't. And the same with this episode, actually. So the first one we're going to discuss is Orison. So this is episode 7 of season 7. It was first aired on the 9th of January in 2000. And the director is Rob Bowman, and it's written by Chip Johannesson. I think I got that right. The rough storyline is that Donnie Pfaster, who we last saw in Irresistible, the violent man who liked to kill and potentially eat parts of women, is currently in prison, and he escapes from prison with the help of the Reverend Orison, who's played by the fantastic Scott Wilson. And Mulder and Scully are tasked with trying to hunt him down and bring him back to justice. Darren, what did you think of this episode?
I'm not a huge fan of Orison for a number of different reasons. The most obvious is that I'm not entirely sure that we needed to see Donnie Pfaster again. I feel like the X-Files has done a number of sequel episodes, and I think the only, outside the mythology, the only sequel episode that really worked for me was Tombs, which I think many would argue is actually better than Squeeze. But I think that stuff like Kitsunagiri and Orison, which are like bring back classic monster episodes, don't really work. And they don't really work because it's hard to recapture like what made a monster so good the first time around. Like, I think that when you're writing an episode featuring a monster, or even when you're writing a story or a film, most of the time, the first episode that you write, or the first story that you write, will use most of your good ideas for that character. And there's really nowhere else to go. Like, I feel like the big issue with Orison is that, like, Donnie Pfaster is an amazing monster. He's truly creepy. Nick Chinland is fantastic, and there's something deeply unsettling to the point where, like, Irresistible is one of the all-time great episodes. But I feel like Orison doesn't really have that much to do with Donnie Pfaster as a character, and so you end up with an episode that inserts him into it, and then just heaps a whole host of other stuff on top that is completely unrelated. The episode he was introduced in Irresistible was an episode about, like, the banality of evil. This idea of, like, whether or not evil was something that, like, came from mankind or disguised itself as something human, or whether it was recognizable, or whether or not, like, the person who looked normal could be the most dangerous thing of all. Whereas Orison doesn't have anything nearly as simple as a plot. Its themes are about, like, it's got everything from, like, tray panning and using the ability to slow down time and suspend memory, to brainwashing, to hypnosis, the idea of God at work in the world, the possibility that Donnie Pfaster might be a literal fricking demon. It's got all these things happening in it, and none of them really come together or cohese, and none of them feel necessary for a Donnie Pfaster story. None of these stories necessitated bringing Pfaster back, and I feel like bringing him back in this way almost diminishes what was so effective about Irresistible, because Irresistible was just like, he's a fairly normal serial killer. He's like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy, and that's what makes him so terrifying. And then you throw him into this episode, which has, like, a reverend who can stop time, and the suggestion that he might be a literal demon, and the possibility that God is literally at work in the world to stop him. And it feels like it just puts too much on the character for him to work as well as he did the first time around.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the actual portrayal of him, like the reveal of him like halfway through the episode as an actual literal demon, is a huge mistake, and it sort of really diminishes the work that was done in the episode Irresistible. He's really just a fall guy in this episode. I mean, he's set up to basically be shot by Scully at the end. He doesn't actually do a huge amount. I mean, I guess he kills one prostitute, I suppose.
And almost kills another.
Kills another.
And you can tell that, like, Rob Bowman as a director, like, this is not Rob Bowman's jam. Bowman is generally, like, he's an action director or a conspiracy director. He doesn't really do very well with sort of, like, conventional scary stories or monster stories. And you can tell watching Orison that, like, Bowman has no interest in doing that stock serial killer episode beat where the pretty woman is at the victim of the creepy leering man man. And so, like, none of the scenes have any pop. And, like, to be fair, that's not a criticism of Bowman. Like, I think that in these serial killer narratives, there's a tendency to luxuriate in the way that female characters, like, victimized and objectified and sort of treated as objects. I think that Bowman's refusal to do that is a very valid artistic choice. But I also think that it leaves the episode completely flat.
I mean, I've always found Donny Faster to be a horrible character. Just personally, as a woman, and when I watched it when I was a young woman, I just found Irresistible a really upsetting episode. I mean, good episode, but very upsetting. And he gave me nightmares. And this episode, he doesn't give me nightmares, but it's just ugly. I feel like it's an ugly story that has no redeeming characteristics or a satisfactory ending. Nothing good comes out of this episode. In fact, nothing but bad things come out of it. And I mean, I understand the X-Files isn't there to always lift our spirits, but there is some, in most episodes, even if they have some sort of bad or difficult or upsetting storyline, there is often an overarching wisdom that comes at the end of it, or you hope at least. And a lot of episodes there are. At the end of this, there is like nothing. I mean, Scully has killed a man who was being restrained, who was handcuffed practically.
And it suggested that, like, God might have been working through her. It's possible God wasn't working through her, but it's implied that God, the Almighty, the All-Powerful, has said, basically, I want Scully to kill this unarmed man who has been stopped, who is being arrested, who is going to get sent back to prison, will probably be trial, and probably be sentenced to death this time around. It's a really weird episode, and it's weirder for the fact that you can see little bits of stuff that, like, interest Carter and tie back to Irresistible. Like, so, for example, there's the story that Scully tells about the scout, the quote from, I think it's To Kill a Mockingbird, where she talks about how I think it was her religious teacher or Sunday school teacher, used to call her Scout, and then he was killed when she was a child, and that was her moment where she conceived the concept of evil at work in the world, which is something Carter's interested in as a writer. But I feel that, like, with, say, this recalls, there's a story that Carter told when he was producing Millennium, about the first moment that he as a child became aware of the existence of evil in the world was when he discovered that his friend's brother had killed one of the Avon delivery ladies. And there's something about the way that it's framed in this episode that sort of reminds me of that. It gives me a sense that, like, Carter, like, because obviously Carter didn't write this episode, Chip Johansson did, who was the showrunner on the third season Millennium. And this episode has a lot of the problems that the third season Millennium has, in that it's overstuffed with, like, New Age theology, good versus evil, the possibility of God at work in the world, and just sort of bang them together in some sort of weird sandwich-like concoction that tastes absolutely horrible. Just wolf it down, because there's another 20 of these coming this year. Orison sort of feels like that. It has this kind of rough outline of stuff that interests Carter, that he wants to talk about this year. So, like, the idea of good and evil, or the idea of God. God is a recurring theme across the 7th season, from the idea of aliens as God in the Biogenesis trilogy, through to, like, Signs and Wonders, or Sinonzit, for example, the revelation with Samantha. Like, there's the sense that Carter wants to talk about religion and God in the world, but he has no idea how he wants to do that. And so you end up with, like, a literally ungodly mess like Orison.
I like the idea of Scully discovering evil in the world through the violent death of someone that's close to her, like a Sunday school teacher. But I just feel it comes way too late. Like, this is an influential childhood memory.
And it's never been alluded to before.
It's never been alluded to, and she suddenly remembers it when she hears a song. I mean, like, I feel like something like that would definitely have an effect on you, and you would remember it, and you might relate it to, i.e. the closest person in your life, Mulder. You might relate it to them earlier, you know? I also feel that the way that religion is used in the X-Files, but specifically in this episode, is just very uncreative, very lacking in creativity, very unimaginative. God will speak to people through this, I don't know, like,
cheesy 70s love ballad, or setting the alarm clock to 666, or by making the light fixtures spark as Scully kills Donny Faster.
Yeah, or he would work through this reverend who's practicing very indoctrinating Christian sort of hypnotic ceremonies. I mean, I actually feel like there's God might work in ways that could be much more original and much more uplifting and sort of really interesting, I would say. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people hate this episode, but the episode, is it Sunshine Days, where the young man creates the Brady Bunch in his house?
Yeah. Or even Improbable later on with Burt Reynolds, where God is shown to be playing checkers or stuff like that with the universe, which is a much more, I think, creative, innovative, and interesting portrayal of, like, the idea of God at work in the universe. And I feel like, yeah, you're right. This is the most cliche, condescending, sort of patronizing and really kind of uncomfortable when you watch it today in the context of like a resurgent political right. Like it's really awkward to watch, because there's a sense when you're watching the episode that like Orison kind of almost believes in a vengeful, righteous God. That like Reverend Orison is not wrong in following God's instruction to take Donny Faster out of prison and kill him. Reverend Orison is wrong when he believes that Donny Faster can be redeemed. Like, there's a sense in Orison that, like, the mistake is not believing that God is vengeful and wrathful and vindictive. The mistake is in believing that God is redemptive and kind and believes in goodness. Like, the God that's present in Orison is one who is, like, petty, hateful, spiteful, who believes that you should take people out of prison and murder them because, like, punitive justice is not enough. And that's something that I find deeply uncomfortable. But I find it unsettling how readily the episode embraces that.
And I think the way that Orison, I agree with you, the way Orison operates is just really... Like, he doesn't seem like a reverend or a preacher or a man of God. The way he gets Donny Faster out of the prison in the beginning is to dupe an inmate into thinking he's cut off his own fingers. I mean, that's horrific. Or he hypnotizes them into thinking this. He's got the power of God on his side. Couldn't he distract them with, I don't know, a loud noise or...
Yeah, a cute kitten or something.
A cute kitten, yeah. We've seen this type of religious, paranormal setting before, and it's not just in the X-Files, it's in Millennium, but, you know, we see it in horror films, I mean, in other TV shows and other films, you know, Exorcist and, you know, The Omen, I mean, you know, this idea of this evil and it's connected to a religion and the religion is, you know, and it just, I don't know, it feels very cliched to me, you know, it doesn't feel all that inventive or imaginative, and it's almost like an alien coming out in one of the X-Files episodes, a little alien, you know, little grey alien, walking up and like going nanu nanu or something, you know, rather than the aliens being something truly weird and strange, yeah, like something, you know, from the most recent film Arrival, where the aliens don't even opposite,
or even the black oil in the X-Files, which was a delightfully weird sort of concept of an alien creature.
If we're really going to talk about God, like, why not talk about how God might be something that we can't even
fathom,
yeah. Same with aliens, I suppose. I also really, really object to Mulder and Scully having these same scenes again and again where they debate about God and religion. And I understand this might be something they'll never agree on, that takes a lot of discussion, but they always take the same positions. You know, Scully believes God is somehow involved and Mulder is just so skeptic.
I like the idea that, like, this is like Mulder's reverse Scully skepticism, because I think it's quite clear looking at the universe of the X-Files that God exists and is at work. I like the idea that Mulder's steadfast refusal to acknowledge this is basically his version of Scully going, well, I was unconscious, I didn't see any aliens. But I admire that aspect of it. I just feel like it's very clumsy. And I feel like when you're talking about, like, the X-Files attitude towards religion is really awkward, because it's got this aspect that it comes up again and again. It happens in Sign Unseat, for example, like in the 7th season. It happens in Revelation in the 3rd season, where there's this weird fascination with the idea of faith as something all-consuming. Like, the X-Files doesn't seem to believe that, like, faith in God, where you go to church once a week and you maybe pray before you go to bed, the X-Files doesn't seem to think that that counts as true religious belief. In order for it to be true religious belief on the X-Files, you have to be willing to, like, sacrifice yourself and others for it. And I find it really disturbing going back and watching now, because obviously they were produced during the 90s, which was a very different time before you had sort of the wave of religious extremism that you have now. And I'm not just talking about, like, the obvious ones, I'm talking about, like, say, Christian fundamentalism as well in the States, where it's become a lot more potent. I feel like going back and rewatching The X-Files as a 90s show, its attitude towards religion can be very off-putting, because it doesn't believe in moderate religion, it believes in extreme religion. It argues that the only religious belief worth having is the kind of one where you believe in absolutes and uncompromisingly. And I find that very hard to watch now.
I mean, I agree with everything you say. You're completely right. It's an uncomfortable theme. It's an uncomfortable theme that hasn't stood the test of time. And the last thing I would say about this episode is that I'm particularly disturbed by the fact that Scully kills Donny Faster, or I assume kills him, or shoots him anyway.
And Mulder covers for her.
And Mulder covers for her. It's like she let her rage get the better of her. I mean, I'm fine with all of it up until that point. Like, I'm fine with her shouting at him and fighting back, and I liked to see her angry then fighting back. It was good to see a woman who, poor Scully's had so many home invasions, actually really fighting back and really being defiant. But her killing him or shooting him, it just goes too far, and it links in my mind to Redux, I think it's Redux or Gethsemane, where Mulder shoots the person that comes into his apartment. And later on, it's sort of implied but glossed over, really, that he has actually killed this man.
And disfigured his face as well.
And I think, are we supposed to truly believe these people are good people if they're doing stuff like this?
And I feel like that this ties back into that what we're talking about there, because there's the implication that this is what God wanted to happen. Because, like, Orison was smuggling the prisoners out of prison in order to murder them. Like, that's what it's revealed is. And, like, he didn't murder Donny Faster, and that came back to bite him. So, basically, Scully then murders Donny Faster. And there's something like the X-Files, like, the episode seems to believe that that is the moral order of the universe. That not only was Scully right to kill Donny Faster, but, like, Orison was wrong not to kill Faster. And there's something very disturbing about that. And, like, this, I say this as somebody who thinks Donny Faster is an absolutely horrible character, and who thinks that if he had been sentenced to death, as it suggests he might have been, I probably would have less of an issue with that. You know, I'm not pro-death penalty, but I would have less of an issue with that than what happens in the episode, because at least then he would have had due process, and he would have been tried, and he would have been, like, put through the system, and sort of, like, there would have been observation of due process. You're right, it's something very unsettling and unnerving, but not in the way the episode wants it to be unsettling or unnerving. It's unsettling and unnerving because the episode treats it so lightly, and it's not at all.
Yeah, and if you're going to make a character do something that's completely out of character, which is something that I think all shows eventually, they fall down that pit hole.
Well, after 7 years, I think, yeah, you've done all the things you can with the character, so let's do some crazy stuff.
Yeah. You're going to have to understand that the audience is not going to follow you down that dark tunnel, and they're not. You need the audience's buy-in, basically, for a successful episode or TV show. And I just don't think the audience's buy-in. They don't buy Scully doing this. And I think that's what the majority of people I know who've watched this episode say the same thing. Like, Scully just wouldn't do that. The Amazing Maleeni is episode 8 of season 7. It was first aired on the 16th of January 2000. It's written by Vince Gilligan, John Shaban and Frank Spotnitz, which seem to be quite a popular writing trio. It's directed by Thomas J. Wright. So the episode centres around a mystery in which the death of a magician, and this magician has died after completing a insane magic trick of spinning his head around 360 degrees, and then of course later on it unceremoniously falls off his shoulders. Essentially, I think you feel Mulder has sought this case out and roped Scully into coming onto it to investigate the death, and they're drawn into the world of magic and illusion, and it all gets very magical and confusing. So, Darren, what did you think of The Amazing Maleeni?
Well, I quite like The Prestige, and this is like a really tired version of The Prestige, so I guess I don't hate it. The Amazing Maleeni has that feeling that a lot of 7th season episodes of the X-Files have, which is, this is a reasonably adequate episode for the middle of the last season of a long-running television show, where everybody feels a little tired, a little exhausted, where there's not a lot of energy on display, and there's a sense of, well, look, we had some ideas, you know, we used most of our good ideas in the previous 6 seasons. We have some ideas scraping down the bottom of the barrel. Let's see what we come up with. And this time we've got dueling magicians. It's a kind of episode that should be more energetic and more fun than it is. Because it's basically about 2 competing magicians. Like one old school sort of theatrical style played by Ricky Jay, and one sort of younger Chris Angel, sort of David Blaine style, played by Jonathan Levitt. And there's sort of be this sort of conflict between the two of them as they're sort of locked in magical battle between one another, trying to constantly one-up one another, playing games with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the cops, the local gangsters, and the local banking, the Craddock Marine Bank. And it feels like it should be more exciting and more compelling than it is. But it's really very dull and very dreary, and sort of like, it has some really nice moments. Like any episode that puts Gillian Anderson smiling in a top hat, like that's enough. Like definitely. It's hard to hate like an episode that has Scully dislocating her shoulder in the final scene to show Mulder that she could do a magic trick. Like, it's hard to hate The Amazing Maleeni, but it's also very hard to get excited about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of fluff, isn't it, really? It's a light fluff that's enjoyable, but not really even that memorable. I think the magic in it doesn't make any sense, and that's one of my main problems with the episode. If you're going to make an episode about magicians and magic tricks and the world of illusion, you need some better magic tricks. And most of the magic tricks that you see in the episode are done with coins and like sleight of hand, the kind of thing that like even a junior magician can learn. Well, I would just say, I mean, I can't do any of these magic tricks, so I probably shouldn't speak, but I probably shouldn't talk about it. But I mean, it's the kind of thing you see like somebody doing at a fair, or You know, when sometimes you're occasionally at a wedding or something and someone's hired a magician and they come round and sort of plague you and they're like, hey, I've got a pound, I'm going to rip it out from behind your ear. And you're like, oh, God. I think they don't ever explain how the amazing Maleeni rotated his head 360 degrees. And the problem with that is they use CGI to make his head rotate. His routine as a magician is just horrendous. I mean, he's basically lecturing you on the history of magicians while he does like a trick with cups and balls. And I was like, God, like, this is awful. So the magic itself could be better, I think, in an episode about magic. Having said that, though, there are some really fun, kind of cute scenes between Mulder and Scully, like Mulder doing the magic trick with the quarter, and the first scene where they joke about the case, you know, and she sort of says the real magic trick is how you managed to get me out here on this case. And the comedy scenes with Maleeni's workplace. We built you a ramp. Yeah, when they find out that he's not actually disabled and he's not in a wheelchair, and they're just, his boss is just so outraged.
I like, because that's the Prestige twist, actually, which is quite clever, because it's him impersonating his twin brother. So I feel like I've just spoiled the Prestige for anybody who hasn't seen it. You should all see the Prestige. It's fantastic. The Amazing Maleeni has something like that, where it has the brothers played by Ricky Jay, where one of them dies, and he basically uses the body to stage an impossible trick. And it feels like it never really earns it or develops that idea in a way that's interesting. It just sort of heaps more and more on top of that. Like, it is, you know, so it starts out as a movie, as an episode about like a guy whose head falls off. Then it becomes about like ripping off a mob boss in order to like get rid of gambling debts. And then at the end, in this big exposition speech that Mulder gives, it turns out that it's actually about this elaborate funds transfer that they're trying to do using the badge number of an FBI agent and Mulder's thumbprint, which is something that's only raised and dismissed in like the final 2 minutes of the episode. It feels like it comes out of nowhere, and it feels like it's not earned. And I feel like that's my big problem with the episode in general, because it's what you mentioned about the magic tricks. I have no problem with the quarters tricks, or the coins tricks, or the balls tricks, because those look like tricks that could actually be performed through sleight of hand on camera. I have bigger issues with what you talked about with the CGI, with the neck twist, or the bit where, say, the John the Levitt character makes something appear in his hand on fire, and then puts out the fire with a dash of his hand. That's clearly done through camera editing. Like, I feel like if you're putting magic on film, it has to look like something that could feasibly, you know, maybe not realistically have been done in camera, but it has to look like something that plausibly could have been done without CGI or without editing in order to maintain a sense of illusion. And I feel like there's a lot of that in this episode, where he turns his head, you get this really awful CGI shot. And like, it kind of fits with this idea that plays out across the 7th season of what's real and what's not real. So stuff like Mulder's fantasy in Amor Fati, or the video game in first-person shooter, or even like the hyper-reality of X-Cops, where you have this question that plays out across the 7th season of the X-Files as to what is real and what is illusion, like what is physically there and what is sort of not there at all. But it doesn't feel earned, and it undercuts, like, for what should be an episode about magic, it feels like it's more an episode about what we can do with CGI and editing, and that doesn't work for me as well. Like, if it turned out in The Amazing Maleeni that, I don't know, Tony Jay was actually an alien bounty hunter who had decided to become a magician in his spare time, like, then I could buy the trick where he turns his head around, like, 360 degrees. But it's the fact that never happens, and it's just like he's just a really good magician. So how the hell does he turn his head around 360 degrees? It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work at all.
Yeah, there's got to be a paranormal element in it. Otherwise, it doesn't fit. I mean, I've had this conversation numerous times with my best friend, because we have this problem where writers break the sort of narrative world that they've constructed. I mean, and I think with this, it breaks the narrative world. It would almost be better for the Amazing Maleeni, as you say, to have some sort of paranormal ability. But they're not suggesting that. They're suggesting he did it through some sort of normal scientifically physics trick, and physics says that you can't turn your head 360
Biology
degrees.
Does not work like that.
It does not work like that. So before we finish this podcast, is there anything else you'd like to add about the Amazing Maleeni?
No, I mean, it was grand. It was the perfectly adequate Maleeni, is probably the best way I could think to describe it.
The slightly interesting Maleeni. Slightly charming Maleeni. Okay, so the next episode after this one, tomorrow, will be episode 76, which will be Signs and Wonders and Sign and Zeit. And please tune in for that tomorrow if you're interested in hearing more about the religious fundamentalism that we were talking about earlier. You can follow us on Twitter at @the_X_cast, or you can go to our Facebook page and group where you can join and meet other X-Files fans and chat about the show. So for the meantime, and until next time, trust no one.